All right, so I have here John Cassavetes' Husbands. I mentioned this on the John Cassavetes, uh, the compilation video that I had made, and was going to be able to review it. And this is a great movie. So this was made in 1970 under Columbia Pictures, starring John Cassavetes, Peter Falk, and Ben Gazzara. So essentially, what the movie is about is three friends that lost pretty much the main guy of their group, and he passes away at a very early age. And they're all in their mid 40s. They're middle class. They have their own families and such, but now they're sort of cast adrift. And it's really the disintegration of not really their friendship, but mostly just what they are as people and their realization of what they have, and ultimately what they find at the end of that. So it is a Husbands is just a very complex. It's a dense movie. Well, not a half, but a quarter of this movie is improvised by John Cassavetes. The singing scenes with all the extras and such, that's very uncomfortable to watch, but represents what the three friends are, well, what they do and how they interact with each other and such. And I could first say that Husbands is not a easy watch. None of Cassavetes' films are. They're pretty dense in nature, but Husbands is especially dense. There's this sort of this spontaneity about it that even some of later Cassavetes' films don't really even have. Husbands is a there. Some people will watch Husbands and they will get somewhat upset with some of the depictions in terms of these people are literally just talking endlessly. I'm not getting anywhere with this, or they're bullying these extras to an extent. There's this sort of not prep school, but this sort of high school mentality that these guys have, that eventually they come to the realization that they probably need to shed or have some more responsibility of. But whenever it comes to the actual story itself, what the plot really evolves into is Ben Gazzara's character is having trouble at home, and eventually, unfortunately, has a domestic dispute with his wife, and he eventually convinces his friends to go to London, where they all try to have a good time, and they try to sort of alleviate all this pain that they're going through, that their friend is gone, but eventually they learn new things about themselves, and eventually what they will lose. So there's a lot of themes in this movie. One I think that most people kind of miss with this movie is the sort of generation gap that even Marshall Fine talks about in this commentary track here on Criterion, which is great. That these are people that lived through, well, sort of like, I believe it was the Lost Generation, right? And they have different ways of, loving or anything like that. They're going into London, swinging 60s, the roundhouse, completely different time. These women are half their age. It's just when they try to hook up with these women, they fail miserably because they just come from a different time. They just, especially Peter Falk's character, there's, John Cassavetes won't stop, being his own guy and compromising and such. And Ben Gazzara just completely loses it and goes off the deep end and just tries to create a completely new life over in London at the end. And I would say that there is a lot more in this movie than what I'm describing it as, because it's this very complex nature of these relationships, how they play off. All I can say is yeah, it's a very dense watch, and most people will not have a good time with Husbands, but because I love Cassavetes' style and the way that he's able to sort of take this complex issue of masculinity and present it in such a fascinating way with these characters that are able to bounce off of each other. I think it's a wonderful movie, and it's probably one of my favorite Cassavetes films. So in terms of the direction, of course, it's Cassavetes, a mixture of improvisation, script direction. Peter Falk said he would never work with Cassavetes after this movie, but of course he would go on to work on him with Women Under the Influence. And then Ben Gazzara does great in his role as his character. I'm sorry, I forget his name. I just think of them as Peter, John, and Ben. But in terms of what Ben Gazzara's character is, he does a fantastic job with what he's given as well. So this movie is absolutely excellent. Please go ahead and see this if you're a huge John Cassavetes fan. If you're not, I wouldn't start with Husbands. I would definitely start out with something a little bit more tamer. Even though that there's no such thing as a tame John Cassavetes movie. Probably start off with Woman Under the Influence or Faces. That's, the two that I would go with. So yeah, that is Husbands from John Cassavetes, and thank you for watching again.